welcome to our webinar. We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. I know you're taking about 30 minutes out of your time to listen to this exciting seminar about energy, emotions, and our bodies. And the reason why we're putting this on is there's some great information that Ana Paula Soares has put together for us to help us understand the energy and emotions and how that affects our bodies. And we just felt it was really important to get this out to you, especially around this day and time and this time of life that we're all in. So without further ado, you can see Ana on the screen here. Ana, thank you for joining us. Appreciate having you here today. We also want to thank awakeningmindbodyandspirit.com, where this is located. We'll have a little text box where you can click on that box and send in comments, and Ana Paula can answer or any questions you might have at that time as well. This is a pre-recorded event, so we do have that option if you do want to have any questions, if you think of anything as you're watching this webinar. Please write it down, take some time, click on that box, and we want to hear from you because this is for you, and that's why we're here today. And without further ado, a little bit about you, Ana. So I'm going to read a little bit about you. And Ana Paula is a licensed professional counselor with a master's degree in clinical and community psychology. Originally from South America, Brazil, she speaks Portuguese, Spanish, and English. And Ana Paula has lived and practiced in Milwaukee, Wisconsin since 2005. Ana Paula has several years of experience in the field of emotional and trauma healing, personal growth, and empowerment. In addition to individual counseling and healing sessions, Ana Paula has also a vast experience leading women's groups, retreats, and workshops. And if you ever Googled Ana Paula online, you'll see that she's very active in the community, has a deep background of helping people. And so, Ana, thank you for being here today and sharing with us this great presentation. I can't wait to get it started. But tell us a little bit more about yourself that maybe I missed.
Wait, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. This times that we're going through right now, there's so much uncertainties, and a lot of people are sharing that they're feeling anxious and living in fear. So much uncertainties about the future, and I think more than ever is important to talk about mental health, emotional health, and our bodies. You know, I think we have neglected a little bit that area, you know, in just the way we organize our societies. And I think right now we can't run from it, right? It's a time that we're at home experiencing so many feelings and so many questions in our heads, and fear, life and death. I mean, deep questions are coming in, deep emotions are coming in. So I'm excited to share some of those pieces of information that hopefully will help you all to feel a little less crazy about what you're feeling, because a lot of what you're feeling right now is very natural of a human experience, you know. So I'm very glad to be here, and my my passion and my personal journey and my professional journey has been in the area of emotional healing, and I'm super glad to share this information. So if you really have any questions about listening all those things, or some of those concepts are not clear, please ask questions, and then we can get back to you on that.
Sounds great. I'm with you. This quarantine is bringing out new emotions and new things that are new. So okay, let's get right into it. Let's get to the first slide and share this exciting information with everybody. So here we go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the first slide I wanted to share is, I just wanted to share, sometimes we don't have those philosophical questions, but it's like, what are we made with? Like, who are we as humans, right? And the interesting thing is that if you go very deep into like what we're actually made out of the same exact material that every single thing in planet Earth and also the cosmos is designed and developed. Is just a matter of how the elements of nature come together to form a tree, a plant, a flower, or humans, right? So we have the same element as nature. So we are part of nature. We are nature. And the other very interesting experience, interesting information is that 99% of us, it's 99% of our body is actually open. It's like open space between those particles that we're made of. So very, very interesting information to share, just because sometimes we get so stuck in our lives and our minds, and we don't recognize that we're nature. We're part of nature, and we're made out of every single element that all other parts of nature is made. So and then on the next slide I wanted to share before I start talking about emotions is, because that's really relevant for emotions, is that we the way that our particles and elements are designed in our bodies and other things in nature is an energetic process that keeps things together, right? With so this energy, depending how they move, we have also frequencies. So we are made out of energy. We are energy, and everything around us is energy. So if we understand that, we're actually able to manage our emotions differently. We're able to manage our bodies and understand our bodies differently and relate to the world in a different way. So basically, we're made out of energy, right? And then in the next slide I wanted to share is, if we are made out of energy, we have different frequencies. Okay, so another thing is, okay, what's being a human again? Being a human is that we are navigating between those two worlds that are the non-physical world and the physical world. Okay, and the only difference is really the frequencies of those two worlds. And I think our science for many centuries has been very attached to the idea of studying the physical world, right? We can measure, we can see, we can count, but now we're kind of going back to some of the ancient traditions of saying, wait a minute, there's some phenomenon here that's happening to us that we don't see, but it's happening, right? And that's the non-physical world, right?
It's
So
kind of
as
like
humans,
a new thing, right? It's like a lot
it's
of people are waking up to this
exactly.
reality that there's more than just what's inside me or what's near to me.
Exactly. And I think you're correct. It's absolutely not new. It's actually like, actually us humans, we're almost we're the last beings to come to planet Earth. So we need to be humble in that way, right? So frequencies and the non-physical world and the physical world has been here way before humans, right? And also in our human experience, in our development of being humans, our ancient traditions 4,000 years ago has been talking about this, right? So if you think about Ayurveda, if you think about some of the indigenous traditions, they have this understanding of the non-physical world in ways that are much more intimate than our modern world. I really think if you study, and that could be another webinar, but if you get into like the history of humanity and the process of how we related to the world, we were much more connected to this understanding of this duality of the non-physical world and the physical world in the ancient traditions. And when we start getting very technical and very scientific about it, we kind of got attached to the physical world. And the reason I'm saying this is relevant because our emotions fluctuate also. We as humans fluctuate from both worlds. And you will see within psychology that I'm going to explain that 90% of our experience as humans, it's unconscious, which is not necessarily sometimes expressed in the physical world. So sometimes we feel like, am I crazy for feeling what I'm feeling? Why am I sensing this? What am I feeling this? And it's irrational. There's no explanation. Yes, because our human experience is much deeper than only our rational mind, which is more related to our physical world. So I
That's
know it's pretty deep and complex, but if we don't allow ourselves to experience those two worlds we're just going to have those we're going to have sensations, feelings, or things that we might not understand.
So it's equally important to spend time in the physical world as it is in the non-physical world.
In fact, we spend time in the physical world and the non-physical world all the time, but we're not aware of it,
Right.
So it's, you said the word awakening, we're not awakened to, and that's exactly a very good word. Because it's not that it's not happening as we are. So if we're not seeing it, it's not that it's not happening. We're just not awakened to it. We're not training to it, So in some of my spiritual journeys, what I have been learning from elders and learning from ancient traditions is that we need to be like retuning, almost like I still remember like the channel of the radio, you need to retuning to frequencies, and our physical world, our eyes and our ears are also, if we train it, so that's why sometimes people do mindfulness, or some people who are more connected to rituals and ceremonies that can open up. So what it means to be opened to the spiritual world basically is an awakening of your senses, awakening to expand your sense of self from the physical world to the non-physical world, so it's not that it's, even if we're not aware of it, it still exists, and it can be measured in ways that is not the same tools in the physical world, but it can be measured too based on quantum physics and some other machines that measure frequencies and things like that, right? And our body feels that. Sometimes you feel like, why am I feeling this? I had a feeling about it. Well, it is changing of frequencies, right?
That's what I was going to ask about the body. So like not only the mind and the eyes and the ears, and the senses, but also, is it possible within our bodies, our skin, and different areas of our body to
Absolutely. Have you ever felt like shiver, like you hear something, or you feel something, and then your skin, like you can feel in your skin, like, oh, I just had I don't know if you have experienced that, but our skin is actually one of our biggest organs. Our skin is very sensitive, and it has so many opening senses that connects directly with our nerve system, right? So we definitely are, once again, if we're not awakened to it, we might not be aware of it, but our bodies are doing the work, of paying attention what's going on around us, and be in sensing what's going around us, even if we're not aware of it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to explain a little bit more about this, once again, going back to the physical world and the non-physical world, but what does that mean to our everyday life, right? So when we, the human experience is really complex, and our human experience starts way before we're born, right? So there is some research showing what they're calling now epigenetics. Once again, our ancient traditions already knew that, but now the science is saying, oh wait, there's a name, epigenetics. And then if you look into genetics in all and dissecting all those things, you can actually, doing research, observing that there is information passed through genes from your ancestors, including behaviors, including also trauma.
Wow.
That's also how we have survived too, so sometimes people have phobias, like, why am I scared of this, why am I scared of that? Sometimes it's really also genetic informations that are coming through two ways: through the genes itself, and also through behavior and learning, right? So like if you grew up and your mother will be super scared of something, and suddenly you learn that that's not safe, right? So that there's that, like you learn certain things and certain emotions and belief systems through experiencing, but also it comes genetically. So our human experience comes very deep. Okay, so then you have your experience in your mom's belly, which also creates all sorts of experiences. You're hearing, you are sensing what your mother's sensing. You have like a very direct relationship, symbiotic relationship with your mother as you are growing. And emotions, remembers energy. So the baby's feeling the emotions that mom is feeling too. Also there's research talking about this. Then you're born, and the birth is also a strong experience. It's our first relation to the world, is our first breath to the world. So that also, it's very, for us who do trauma work and work with our unconscious, we can also recognize that the birth is a very profound experience on somebody's perception of the world, right? So there's techniques, breath work and rebirth work, that also brings you back to your rebirth to release some of the trauma of birth. So
is it, just a quick question, if you don't mind. So is it that we're connecting from ancestral genetic ties as we go through the birthing process? We carry those ancestral maybe emotions or genetics with us. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm saying, well, I wasn't, but that is very cool. What you're saying is
Okay.
very intelligent, and it's true. So yes, we can actually, for people who work with trauma work and people who work with birth, midwives and people who work with birth in a more deep way, you can actually see patterns of birth in generations. So a birth experience could be also generational. And sometimes there's trauma healing happening within that birth, but it's connected to generation. So yes, the birth can be connected to ancestry experiences or knowledge, right? And there are ways, if you're working with the unconscious, to figure those pieces out if you get there, right? But what I was saying is that the birth experience itself, even though we think, well, but it's a baby, like why is it such an important thing? The reason is because when we're babies, we don't have language yet. So a lot of our sense of existence is within our sensations. And whatever, it's very raw experience to be a baby. We don't think about this, but it's really raw experience to be a baby. We don't have language to say what we're feeling, and we don't have a sense of self yet. So if you ask a newborn, who are you? What's your mission in life, or what do you like? The babies are just gonna cry because they're hungry, or they're gonna like smile because you smile, right? So there is this very raw relationship to the world when we're babies. Why is it important? Because for trauma work and for stress work and for getting to know us as humans, is very precious moment in our lives to be babies. So there are some experiences we have when we're babies that stay with us, and we don't have words to express it. That's another reason why unconscious work is so important. Because I have worked with people in the past that have like trauma. They don't understand why. It's like, I have everything. I have a good family. I have a good job. Why do I feel that sense of loneliness? Why do I feel this sense of abandonment, right? And sometimes it's because it's some of those things that happened to us even prior to us having language. And stays with us really strongly. Remember that when we are little, we don't have, our brains is still developing. Okay, so we are actually developing our nerve system. There is a huge piece of the nerve system who has been developed within your mom's belly, but there's a huge part of your brain who's still developing as you grow up. So a baby and a child, they needs to be treated very preciously, because trauma abuse in childhood is intense for the human psyche, because you don't have yet protection to make sense of what happened. And also you're very raw in your senses, so physical abuse, emotional abuse for childhood is intense for the human experience, and it could carry through your life, but it's not all negative. beauty in growing up as a human, right? So all all the sensations we have of joy and curiosity and being in the world, you know, we're starting to develop in childhood, you know. So that's why it's so important to pay attention in taking good care of children and allow them to be curious, because we're developing our pathways as we're growing up. Okay. And then so then let's say we're growing up and we're experiencing all of this in the world. So I wanted to share this once again, how it works in everyday life, this whole duality I mentioned in the physical world and the non-physical world. Because as we're growing up, from babies to adults, we experience that at the same time. Okay. And then so the line that you're seeing, there's more horizontal, is a line of the physical world. That is when you experience your physical body and your rational mind. That's when you have your chronological experience, right? And your time, sense of time. So I know that today is someday, yesterday. I know that I was born this year. There's a chronological experience for our minds and our rational mind. Okay. And that's where we also build our personalities, yeah, our social norms. Is it okay to do this? It's not, you know, okay to do this. Different cultures have different social norms. That layer, the horizontal layers, when we live, experience all of this. Okay. And this other layer that we live, which is more like vertical, and this is more for you to understand it, because truly things are a little less, you know, squared. But just for us to understand, this vertical world is much more the non-physical world. And that's when you have non-chronological. So sometimes people say, why do I remember this from so long ago? It's like not present, right? It's like past. No, it's not present. It's not past. It's the present. You're holding now in the present what happened in the past. So it's much less chronological. Our non-physical experience is less chronological. Sometimes we have dreams, and then you're like, wait, this is the future. You know, something happened, what I dreamed. So it's because it's not so chronological. Okay. Then we have access to also like our own unconscious mind, which is a big part of who we are also in this layer, and is much more a soul, not so much a personality, right? So in this vertical or horizontal line is like, okay, I'm Ana Paula, I'm a psychotherapist, right? This is much more this. But if I'm going this way, who are you? Well, it's a bigger conversation, right? Because it's like more like a soul journey. Okay. So I think it's important. I'll explain you later why is it important to pay attention to those both worlds. And in the next slide, I want to talk about then the unconscious. I have said that word a couple times. So what I want to say with this is that psychology has explained, especially with Freud, and then other people explain it later with Jungian psychology, is that, you know, suddenly they recognize, wait a minute, you know, there is the behavior, there's the things that people do, the things that people think, but then there's all those other layers of existence from somebody that you recognize when you're doing deeper work. Okay. And what are those? Those are things that you don't have it in your conscious. You don't know it's there, but it is present. You know, sometimes it could be feelings. Sometimes it could be belief systems. Sometimes could be memories. And sometimes could be all those connections with your ancestors that I mentioned, the generational baggage that we carry, right? And that's all only counting our own consciousness in unconscious. Then you have the collective conscious, but that's another webinar.
I have a question about the subconscious, unconscious, and maybe the connection I saw on the previous slide. It said records.
Yes.
Is there any connection to that?
Yes. So when you say records, it's once again, that could be another webinar, but it's records. What does it mean when I say records? It's what you're tapping into collective conscious too, right? So what Jung said in Jungian psychology is that, you know, wait a minute, there are something that connects all of us that we might not be aware of it, but it connects all of us, right? So for example, one big example of collective consciousness is symbols. Symbols, we have symbols that showed up in different cultures at the same time that nobody could explain way before there was internet and way before there was like ways that we could connect, right? Like, so you observe in the history of humanity that there's some patterns of shifts that happen, that it's collective. Okay, so that symbols is one way that collective conscious can be expressed, right? And the records, what does that mean? Is that everything that happens, it exists. So it has to exist somewhere, right? So even a thought, even a memory, even an experience, it's always, it exists and it reverberates somewhere. So there are records of our experiences that you can tap into it. So for example, when you're doing ancestral healing work, you can tap into this. So I do breath work, therapeutic breath work, and through that you can go really deep into unconscious, and sometimes you get into deeper unconscious, which is more connected to family ties, and you can really access some of those records. That's what I mean by records, you know.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And yeah, so I just wanted to share a little bit about this idea of conscious and subconscious and unconscious, right? The subconscious is like, it's closer to our conscious, right? It's something that we kind of put it out, you know. And the unconscious is something that we might don't have access to it until we really like tap in it. And normally to get very deep into your unconscious, that we call different levels of consciousness, right? So that is, some people use breath work, some people use meditation, some people use plants. In the ancient tradition, there was a lot of plant use for connecting with your unconscious, because you need to get out of your rational mind to be able to access that, you know. So okay, so the next, yeah, in the next slide. Okay, so now we talked about our psychic and our mind, and I want to talk about our bodies now, because it's very important for us to understand how our body functions, the physiology of our body, to be able to understand emotions and to be able to understand what to do with our emotions, especially in times now with so much uncertainty and fear in economic crisis, political crisis, right? So our body has several different systems, as we learn in school, right? However, in school, they teach us that very separately, right? So you have you have the circulatory system, so you have all those different systems, right? So, but we don't recognize is that the systems, the medical model is much more connected to symptoms. So, okay, what do you have? You have something in your heart, so let's deal with your heart. Okay, I have something in my knee, let's deal with your knee. But however, what our ancient traditions already told us with Chinese medicine and other things, but that is all connected, right? And now people are doing more research on all of this, and they're recognizing that our body is just a perfection of connections, and one thing is related to the other thing, okay? And why is this relevant to emotional health? Is because our emotional health is not only connected to our brain, but it's connected to our hearts, it's connected to our guts, you know, and there is like new information to show how that all works. Okay, so in the next slide, I want to show it to you that in a more, I don't want to get super technical, but I wanted to share that we have in our brains, we have 3 different brains, and this has been created based on our evolution as humans. Okay, our first brain is the reptile complex, and that's much more primal. It's related to our survival, right? It's related to really survival, making sure that you have a shelter, that you have food, and you defend yourself. So that's the first brain. The second brain that was developed is the limbic brain, the limbic system, the limbic brain, that has to do with our emotions. Okay, so it's much more related to our emotions, and is related also to the connection we have with other people. Okay, so we became social beings because of that brain. Okay, because if we were just reptile complex brain, we're just living to survive and eat and run, right? Like a lot of animals do. The limbic brain made us connect with other people. We have emotions. I care about you. I want to be next to you. So that's a very important system for us, because it's very connected to our self-regulation too. Like for me to feel compassion, I need to be connected to that, to the emotions of loving and connecting, right? As much as the other emotions that come with it. Okay, and the third brain is more the neocortex brain, which is more sophisticated. Let's put it this way: it has came the last in our development, which is more related to our rational thinking, more related to the ability of create new solutions and to be able to compare and make a difference. Okay, so those three brains are important to us. Okay, but our modern world has been very fascinated with our neocortex brain lately, and we are like, all right, we are rational beings, we can think and we exist, you know. So there's philosophers and scientists saying this: if I think, I exist, right? And that's true in part. That's not completely true. As humans, we have the three brains. So if we're not really balanced into those three, or if we cannot self-regulate between the three, we're not living in full potential. Okay, so then the next slide I want to share with you is that how does it work then, right? Like, how do we go from one brain to the other brain? So basically what happened is that we are 100% interacting with the outside world all the time. I'm talking to you right now, I am thinking, but at the same time I'm processing what's going on around me. If I'm cold, if I am, right? But we might not be aware of it, but we're processing it all the time. Okay, so let's say I'm talking to you right now and somebody comes screaming at the door. My reaction will be, something is wrong, I need to be aware, you know. So that shifts completely my body, my functions, my physiology. Okay, so I have three kinds of physiologists who are connected to those brains. Okay, so the first one is actually that I want to share is the middle one. Okay, you see the middle one there. So it's the flight and fight. That is a very important survival skill. Okay, that is connected to our emotions. That's why I'm explaining all of this to get to the emotions. Okay, so that's very connected to the emotion of fear and anger. Okay, anger as a way of defense and fear as a way of defense. Okay, so now we're experiencing a pandemic. We're experiencing shifts in our everyday life, uncertainties, fear of contracting the virus, fear of our family members to be contracted. So there's a lot of fear. Okay, what happened is that in fear, our physiology shifts. Okay, and then it goes into flight and fight. Okay, so if we need to fight, normally what happened, our whole physiology shifts, our digestion system stops or slows down, so you can have enough blood circulating into your legs so you can run, or arms so you can fight. Okay, our jaws shift. So a lot of people have tension in the jaws. It's because you are in alert, you are in flight and fight. Okay, the tip of our fingers get like cold, our hands start getting sweaty. This is all to shift how to say the temperature of your body. Is regulating the temperature of your body. Okay, your eyes shift, and then you have less saliva in your mouth. Okay, have you experienced that before, where just like something was so tremendous that you just like, or you're nervous and you can't talk, and then you have a stomach ache and you have a headache? Well, this is all normal. It's all physiological responses to fear. Okay, what's the problem is that if we stay chronically in this state, what happened is that if we are over stressing our system, and that's when we have chronic diseases. Okay, so then, and when we have emotional unbalance, so we have anxiety, we have panic attacks, and then we start, then everything becomes threatened to us. Okay, so then people become nervous, and that's what, sometimes people can have like social anxiety, because your nerve system is wired to be protecting you. Okay, so this person is dangerous, don't come closer to this person, you're going to get hurt, you're going to, right? So what happens is that if you are chronically in fear, it can make you live in an experience of protection, and not allow it for relationships to start, not allow it for new creation to happen, right?
So it might
um
be a pattern that just continues.
it
Like we
it
may
be
get stuck in a pattern.
Absolutely. And let's go back to the childhood. Remember that I said that taking good care of children was very important because of that too. So imagine if you don't have, as a child, right? If you don't have your brain all developed, you also don't have the psychic all developed to say, to make a discernment, like, oh, this is okay, this is not, right? Children are much more raw. So then you start wiring your brain that way. You literally, you live, and then you start living in fear, right? Most of the time, this fear, we are so complex as humans that we just start overcompensating for it. Okay, so for example, it transforms into shame.
Mm-hmm.
It transforms into other things. We make it all complicated ways that we can get very, how to say, protect ourselves from feeling that way, right? So then it's just like, you know what, nobody likes me, I'm going to stay home, because then I don't have to feel that way, right? So we start overcompensating, right? So sometimes a lot of our everyday life behaviors are related to the way we're seeing the world, that is based on those three levels. Or you are on the flight and fight, and you're wired that way. And even if you're not, you're just like, I'm just sitting down here, there's nobody, there's no threat, but I still feel that way, is because your body and your mind is wired that way to protect you. So
Gotcha.
then the other one I want to share is the freeze. That one is extremely important for trauma work, because the freeze is sometimes what gets us stuck into a situation that happened to us, and we have a hard time emotionally to deal with it. The freeze is really related to sense of hopelessness and sense of power and presence. So this freeze is also a defense. So imagine a little animal, right? There's animals, like, if you're gonna attack, what do? They play dead, right? The play dead is not really a play. They really physiologically are quiet as they can be, so they cannot be eaten. And that's true for us as humans too. We do the same thing. So then we can start developing people that have personalities like more depressed or more quiet, or I'm just going to be quiet here. So people who doesn't feel like they can express themselves, or very low self-esteem, because they don't think, they freeze in their existence, in the way that they're in the world. So, and it's important for trauma work, because that feeling of freeze is what gets us stuck, because if we're frozen, we don't feel like we can defend ourselves. So then we victimize, we stay in that position of victim, and we don't think we can change that because we're frozen. So there's techniques of trauma healing, through somatic psychology, through your body, or through breath work, or that can literally, like, reawaken your freeziness, right? And through the breath, you can do that too, with meditation, things like this. And the third one is the one that is more connected to the neocortex brain, which is the social engagement. That one is more complex and is more connected to joy, compassion, sense of groundness. Okay, so it is the capacity that we have to go like this. Oh, okay, that was horrible, I am feeling angry about it, and let's talk about it. let's talk about it. Like how, so that's the ability of a social skill that you have, an emotional intelligence that you can basically get out of the flight and fight and freeze by yourself, right? But that takes awareness, and that takes, maturity, emotional maturity. Think about a child that has been abused by an adult. Like you don't have the same authority, the same intelligence, or psychological balance, or maturity to do all of this, right? So a lot of our freeze, flight, and fight comes also from childhood experiences. Sometimes we think about trauma as very huge traumatic experiences, and truly, it could be little things, but for us, it's big. There are people who are doing breathwork sessions, and they remember the first day to go to school. And we don't think, well, it wasn't super huge and traumatic, I'm just taking my kids to school, but that was for the kid huge. Or other things, like siblings, or just things that the parents used to tell them, all of us, right? So sometimes little things seem not to be super huge traumatic things, but they are definitely wiring us to flight or fight or freeze, and that's why sometimes trauma work, I think, is so important, because we think like, oh, I don't have any trauma. Well, if you're human, and if you went through birth, and if you experience life, you have baggage, because that's life. So let me just go through. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that was a great point. I really like how you clarified all the different areas. And this slide is just wonderful to see, from a visual standpoint, for those folks that see things visually. It's a really nice slide.
Yeah, and it's like, it's so, to me it seems obvious, but it's not. And a lot of people never talked about this in the years of psychology that I studied. I didn't learn that from I didn't learn that in school, actually. So it's really like a new concept. Like we're still very connected to the medical model, where things are very segregated. So people are studying the mind, people are studying the body, people are studying spirituality, but not, like, few people are putting it all together. But it's changing now. A lot of people have more conscious of the complexity of our experience as humans. So the next slide I wanted to share is that, just to make it a little bit more complicated, we have the 3 brains, and then we have another 3 brains in the whole body. So we have our brains that we know more because we study it more, but we also have our gut and our heart as huge functions for the how to say, the self-regulation of our emotions and just our existence in general. Okay, so the heart, actually, they're finding out that the heart has more neural connection and pathways through the brain that the brain has to the body. So who's sending who messages? Normally before we used to say the brain commands the whole body, right? Well, now scientists are recognizing that that's not how it works. I mean, there's like, it doesn't work like hierarchically. So why is that important? Because your heart, which also carries a lot of your emotions, are connected to the heart and the gut, are also sending messages to the brain. So if your emotions come in and send a message to the brain and says, something's not right, it hurts, it's not right, so go run, right? So then you act in those ways, right? So it's very important to pay attention in gut health, and also important to pay attention in your heart, because there's those 3 main things happening at once. And I'm excited to learn what science is going to learn later of other layers of the intelligence of our bodies.
So when you
And
say
then
butterflies in your stomach, it might be that the stomach is telling the brain something, that emotion.
absolutely, yeah, exactly. And we digest emotions too. So our gut is really related to anger sometimes. So sometimes people that have, I have worked with people in psychosomatic that went through, had all those like digestion issues, and they went through all those like tests, and there's nothing wrong, right? It's not that there's nothing wrong, is that it's like the way the person's processing emotions, remember the freeze state?
Mm-hmm.
When in the freeze state or in the flight and fight state, the digestion it stops, because you need to pay attention to other things, right? So that's one way that the digestion shifts. But when you have those butterflies in your stomach, like you say, those are hormones. They're all shifts in chemistry in your body that goes back to your brain.
Gotcha.
The heart is extremely important too. Why? The rhythm of your heart also is connected to your system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic uh, systems. And what happens is, if you have your heart, I don't know if you paid attention how your breath is connected to your emotions, right? So if suddenly you have like a very traumatic experience, you shift your breath right away, right? Or if you're in love, you go like, oh, right? Or if you're angry, like, so the brain, the breath shifts a lot with your emotions, right? And why is that? Because also the breath, the amount of oxygen you have in your brain is regulating many other chemistries in your body, and the speed of the rhythm of your heart can also send signals to the brain to say if things are okay or not, right? So if I go and I don't have enough oxygen in that second, my heart, it's going to have a different rhythm that's going to boom 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 boom, right? And then go say, oh, you gotta run, right? So that's why it's so important to connect with your breath, and that's why it's so important mindfulness exercises and breathing, because the breath is one of the few things that you can actually have complete unconscious and conscious. Okay, if you are a really connected yogi, you can connect with your digestion system, but normally all of us don't. We're just digesting, we don't know how, right? But the breathing, we can do both. We can be totally unconscious of it, and we can be conscious about it, right? So as much as you're conscious about your breathing, more you can self-regulate, because then you shift the rhythm of your body, of your heart, that sends signals to your brain that you're okay. Okay, so that's why breathing is so important, and why calming exercises has to do with breathing slower. So let's go to the next. So the beauty of balance, emotion, being able to deal with your emotions, is truly to be able to connect, the heart and the mind, and be more aware of it, and make sure that your emotions and your logical mind are connected, not only like experience everything through emotions, because then you're also not being able to see things and see clearly. I don't know if you ever experienced something that you're like, I'm so stressed, I'm so angry, I cannot think clearly, or everything's foggy, right? Because you're so emotional that your neocortex, or your rational brain is not functioning well. But if you're super rational and you're very, you can only be thinking about right or wrong, you also putting yourself into this small box that is not allowing you to experience other ways, right? That's when there's a lot of suffering, a lot of shame, because we're never going to fit in that box, because you're humans. And so like, okay, you're wrong, you're right, bad person, bad girl, all this polarities, right or wrong, is much more the rational brain. If you live too much in a rational brain and not so much in your emotional, it's also unbalanced, so having that balance is really good. And then the next slide I want to share, well, that could be a whole webinar only in that one, but it's really about intelligence, emotional intelligence. We all have different kinds of intelligence, and there's like music intelligence, language, but emotional intelligence is, I think, super important, because it's how you live your life with quality, I think. So there's a couple key components of of emotional intelligence. One is self-awareness, very important. If I'm not aware of my own emotions, if I'm not aware of myself, um, I have a tendency of just like explode or live my life without feeling a sense of control, so being aware, and you can do this through your breath, you can do just by putting your attention to yourself, right? So we shouldn't ignore our emotions, and we should also, so for example, if I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling sad. If I'm feeling sad and I pretend I'm not feeling sad, it's kind of like the that thing that goes like, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And if you don't pay attention, it's going to be like this. Our emotions are like that. So sometimes people say, I don't know why I feel so sad. And then if we go deep in healing work, it's just like that sadness has been there for so long, but it was never dealt with, right? So very important to be self-aware and understand which feelings you're feeling and accept the fact that you have them. I'm not an angry person. Well, I'm not saying you're an angry person, but how are you feeling right now? I feel angry. Okay, let's accept the fact that you're feeling angry, and that's okay. There's so many reasons why we feel angry. Sometimes anger is not a negative thing. It's just like something's not right. You need to pay attention, so self-awareness is important. Self-regulation is what I said, to be able to regulate yourself, and children, they need to learn how to do that. So if I am a father or mother and I scream at my children because they're screaming at me, what kind of teaching I'm doing? I'm just literally mirroring their anger and not helping them regulate anything, right? So self-regulation is something that we learn. And it's important to teach children to self-regulate, and first of all is awareness. Oh, I can see you're angry. I can see I can see that is upsetting you. What you need now, how can I support? So teaching to self-regulate, so then you're going to be a happier adult, promise. Empathy is a very important feeling for intelligence and social skills, and motivation. And motivation is basically just energy also, like everything, but it's that interaction of changes. So in order for you to be self-aware, self-regulate, empathy, there is motivation, right? If you're completely not motivated, none of that's going to happen. You're just like so depleted, so and then sometimes you're needing a deeper healing if you're so depleted and not having motivation. So I think that's what I wanted to share for this webinar. There's every slide can go deeper and deeper. I really appreciate your time listening, and I think I would love to have people to take care of themselves emotionally and reflect on their needs. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Ana Paula. That was awesome. I do have just one question, because I think people might have this on their mind, which is, when you talk about follow your heart, how does that, from a, I guess, psychology sort of look? How does that feel when you say to somebody, follow your heart? Is it really your heart is telling you some stuff, or just that intuition and follow your intuitive person?
I think both are true, right? I think when people say follow your heart, is because the heart is, it's a profound question, because the heart is also, spiritually speaking, the heart is also a portal to that non-physical world I talked about in the beginning, right? So in our hearts, and that could be the physical heart, but that could be the energetic heart too, that we're experiencing. It's also a channel to your unconscious too. So, and also it could be also like your emotions, right? So I think it really depends on what people are saying, right? Sometimes follow your heart is like what you're feeling. Does it feel good about it? It doesn't feel good about it? It's important to pay attention on your feelings, because they are there for a reason. It's not because we're crazy or you're crazy. There's a reason why. If I'm angry, there's a reason why. I might be feeling trapped with the situation. I might be feeling unheard. I might be feeling unseen. right? So, and I'm feeling angry, or this might be reminding me of situations of childhood, you know, so there's a reason why. I'm feeling sad. Why? You know, there's something there that needs to pay attention. I'm feeling joy. There's a reason, right? So paying attention in your heart could be that, could be pay attention in your emotions because it's saying something. And it's part of who you are. You don't want to ignore, you know, a part of you. Like it would be kind of the same thing of like me trying to do something with one arm, you know, I have to overcompensate, and that's what we do, right? And the other layer to this is like the heart is a portal to the unconscious too. So um, if you need to know something deeper about yourself and understand, you know, what's going on inside, sometimes when you do breathwork sessions or any experiential healing for trauma, you need to check it out. You need to go to see what the emotions are, and you need to go deeper in the heart because it's a portal to that, you know. So your question is um, pretty deep in that sense. You know, there's just two layers to it.
Gotcha. Thank you. That helps a lot. That's very interesting.
Mhm.
I appreciate all the work that you did to put into this webinar. It was really informational, and I hope that people feel comfortable just, you know, sending this link out and sharing this with friends or people that might need this information. Thank you again.
Yeah, I think more than ever, I think always it's important to talk about emotions and our bodies and everything. But more than ever, I think people are having a lot of emotions and having a lot of fear. And I think if we don't understand how it works, we might have some feeling of shame and guilt for feeling certain ways. And it's just the natural way of humans. And the fear is there to defend us. We just need to know what to do with it, you know? So thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. We'll see you at our next event. Have a great day.